Yo, yo, welcome back from another well, not from. You're coming on another Trey Venture. I'm Trey. Thank you so much for being here. I'm fresh off making a whole other video that ended up taking me longer than I thought, but I think it came out pretty well. So I'm probably going to drop these roughly at the same time because they're kind of related. This is about to be Arrowverse episodes that we should have gotten. The Arrowverse was one of the most interesting decisions the CW ever made to follow through on. It spanned out a couple of shows that I feel like overall did well, but there were some missed opportunities in the Arrowverse that I think we really should have gotten. I can go back and do these for episodes of the individual shows themselves because there are definitely things that I think they should have done in those that were missed opportunities. But this, I want to say overall for the Arrowverse in and of itself, because we eventually got to a point where they started doing crossovers between the shows and characters were showing up in other shows, or they would do crossover events that would be like 4 to 5 episodes long of the different shows and how the teams of people would work together. And I feel like there were some missed opportunities for what those crossovers either should have been or could have been. And these are some crossovers that I think they set up in the Arrowverse that they never did enough payoff for. They just kind of rolled with. I don't really have any graphics or anything for this. I'm just going to kind of list off ones that I think we should have gotten. Um, so the first, I'm dying. The first missed opportunity or episode that we should have gotten in the Arrowverse should have been a Flash episode where we met either the OG Flash or the Invasion Flash. For those of you who don't know, the version of the Flash that we see in the Flash TV show and that's featured in the Arrowverse is technically the second incarnation of what that character should have been. His main villain, Eobard Thawn, goes back in time and ends up killing Barry's mother, which results in a separate timeline where he then has to coach Barry in order to become the Flash so that it doesn't disrupt him from existing in the future. Crazy work. But essentially, he creates what's known as a fixed point eventually in the Arrowverse, where in order for a timeline to exist, a specific event has to happen. And when he kills Barry's mom, he essentially creates a fixed point, creating a new timeline that would have existed. So I personally feel like we should have gotten an episode where Barry got to meet the original Flash at some point. Because at that point in the story, the Flash should have been powerful enough to where time travel or traveling to another timeline should have been a thing, or he should have survived the rewrite of his timeline or something like that. I think it would have been an interesting thing for Barry to reach, especially because the season 1 finale of The Flash involved Barry going back in time to essentially correct the timeline, but he chooses not to, which ultimately solidifies the version of the Arrowverse that we end up getting until the end of Flash season 2, where Barry goes back in time, creates Flashpoint, and then ultimately remaps the Arrowverse that we knew, so we don't even stay on it for too long. My point being that I think we should have gotten the OG Flash. If we weren't going to get the OG Flash, then we should have gotten Invasion Flash. Now, though they had the Brave and the Bold and the Heroes United crossovers in the first season of Flash and the second season of Flash, respectively. In the third season, we got our first major crossover with the invasion storyline, where the Earth was being invaded by a group of aliens called the Dominators who could control minds, and so Barry assembles a team of heroes in order to try and fight them off. And in this event, we get a recording from a future Barry that we never meet, who essentially tells us that Barry can't be trusted for an XYZ reason, and then he announces that he created Flashpoint, which changed so much of everybody's lives and blah 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 blah. But it feels weird because I don't think that there's a legitimate time frame where we could have ever had that version of Barry. It would have been interesting to see what Invasion Barry was actually like. So if we didn't get OG Flash, I feel like we needed Invasion Barry expanded upon because for one, his recording doesn't even really make sense for the context of when it should exist. I think there's something wrong with the Invasion Flash storyline. Like it only really serves the purpose of driving the conflict in the narrative, but there's no real good reason why that version of Barry should exist. Um, and especially why we we got it in a Legends episode. Like I get that they were trying to set up the connection to where like Barry might not be trustworthy or whatever, but it felt such like it felt so weird to set up, especially because it was introduced in a Legends episode and they time travel with the Wave Rider, which is their time ship for anybody who's watching this and is just listening to me. Yeah, they use an AI named Gideon, who Future Barry is the one who creates the original Gideon. Um, Gideon appears in both the Legends and the Flash TV show. So it felt weird because it was just like, why wouldn't maybe I'm misremembering, but why wouldn't Gideon just give them the the message for whoever they needed? Yeah, like it felt like they already had that connection. But I seriously feel like we should have gotten an episode where either OG Flash or Invasion Flash met up with Barry and we got to have a dual Flash timeline meetup. And no, the Flash that he meets uh, after by going to the future to see what life is like after Savitar don't count to me. The second episode of the Arrowverse that I feel like we absolutely should have gotten was the original origin story of Eobard Thawne. I don't know how they dropped the ball on this, but it don't make sense to me that Thawne could be so much of a menace throughout the 9 seasons of Flash, and we still didn't get to see that original storyline where he gets so pissed off that everything essentially starts out. Like we get like an episode in season 2 where original Thawne gained his speed powers and goes back in time, but he doesn't know who Barry is yet. And so he formulates the plan to do what he's going to do to Barry from that point. And we get told that that's essentially his origin story. And I'm like, no, nah, that does not work out for me. I want to see the real event of why Thawne hates Barry because that was such a pivotal aspect of his character, and it doesn't make sense that we didn't actually get to sit down and see it play out. And the reason I feel like they didn't do it was because they probably didn't really know how to do it without making Barry look bad or without making Thawne look too petty. I feel like they tried to keep it mysterious so that the ambiguity could really lead into the nature of his character, but it just feels weird to me that they didn't actually get to show us that original instance where Thawne grew his hatred for the Flash from. Just a missed opportunity on my part. So another one that I think is a missed opportunity is that we never got a crossover between Supergirl and Arrow. And I think that would have been a really cool thing for them to do because the characters were so different. I could almost see Supergirl bringing him to National City in her universe and helping with a helping to solve something in a way that like only another super could look at the situation. For those of you who don't know or didn't watch Supergirl, she works for the Department of Extra Normal Organizations, DEO. I don't remember what it all stands for. She essentially works for a secret government organization that keeps aliens at bay in her world. And it would have been an interesting thing if Oliver got to cross over because they were so distant and they're so diverse in their styles of superheroing, but they had like a really strong respect for each other that I feel like they should have built on. They gave Barry episodes with Kara, but I think a Kara Oliver storyline would have been a really fun to see and really interesting to see how they would have tried to pull it off. Um, yeah, I think that they really needed that because they they really sink in that Supergirl, Green Arrow, and Flash are like the premier three heroes for the Arrowverse. Um, I said them in the order that it appeared in my mind. By the way, I'm not putting Supergirl before Arrow in his own universe, but um, I think that it would have been interesting if we had had solo episode or team up episodes for each of those three individually, and we were almost there, but we never got that Supergirl Arrow crossover, which I think should have happened post the Invasion crossover, but before the Earth X crossover, which was the following year. So somewhere in between there. After they realized that Supergirl is from another Earth and stuff like that, I feel like there should have been a moment where either she relied on him or he swallowed his pride and called on her for backup or something like that. Would have been cool. Um, some honorable mentions. I think we should have gotten a Supergirl Black Lightning crossover post Crisis. So eventually they have Crisis on Infinite Earths, and the multiverse essentially gets destroyed and then reformed from one universe where everybody exists on one Earth. So no more separate Earth for Supergirl, no more separate Earth for Black Lightning. The main Arrowverse stars that exist all exist on one Earth. Eventually, the rest of the multiverse comes into recreation and reforms, but it kind of takes time. I feel like Supergirl and Black Lightning should have had a crossover just because Black Lightning was so hood and Supergirl was so woke. Like I think I think that crossover would have gone super crazy. Um and that's not me ragging on Supergirl. I just think that her version, that depiction of the character with that depiction of Black Lightning, would have been such a crazy dynamic duo. But it would have been interesting because they had already set up a villain that I think would work for both of them in Livewire. Um, because she's another lightning based villain that could have um, been called on to like negate the abilities of Black Lightning or give them trouble or like fake him for being a criminal or something like that, and then Supergirl goes to shoot, I want to say Dakota City, but that ain't right. Where are they in Black Lightning? What is the name? Hold on a second. Black Lightning CW City. Freeland. Yeah, dang. I should have known that one. Goodness gracious. Freeland. Um, Kara goes to Freeland. I think that would have been crazy. I don't know how well they would have how well she would have handled it, but I think that that would have been a really cool honorable mention. Honorable mention. Another honorable mention is a Black Lightning Diggle crossover post Crisis. Now, this one would have just been cool because it would have been interesting for them to expand upon. In the Arrowverse, John Diggle is one of the first characters that we got to see. And as the show got on, as the show continued on, we got to see more of his backstory and see that he was, I think, adopted by a general named Stewart. Now, in the comics, that general is the same character who is the father of Lynn Stewart, who is married to Black Lightning. And in Crisis, there's a moment where the two of them meet. They give each other the black eyed nod, but it's also a really interesting homage to the fact that in the comics they're extended family. And so post Crisis, where everything becomes one single universe, I feel like it would have been an easy crossover, especially because Diggle was going off to do his own thing. Um, for General Stewart to have been raising Lynn and John Diggle, and I guess his brother Andy, or maybe Andy and Diggle got separated after they became like he needed to get adopted or whatever. I don't know, but it would have been interesting to see their family dynamic crossover and then make a nod to that aspect of the comics. I think it would have been cool. Anyway, continuing on with Black Lightning, this is number 4 of my tried and trues. This is episodes we should have gotten. The Black Lightning and Flash crossover absolutely needed to happen. I don't know why, but we had Crisis on Infinite Earths, and then at the end of Crisis, Barry essentially creates the old school hangar meeting place for the Justice League, the Hall of Justice. I was about to say, like, I don't remember what it was called. Barry essentially creates the Hall of Justice and invites Black Lightning to be a premier member of. They never get to say it, but we know that it would have been the Justice League. Um, and then in the Armageddon crossover, which is a 5-part crossover event that starts with the Flash, he just like randomly meets other heroes that exist in the Arrowverse. Um, the major plot point was that Thawn was trying to make Barry think that he was going insane while also changing things in the timeline so that people were growing distrust of Barry and not knowing like the things that he was doing. Um, and the issue with it is that eventually Barry calls Black Lightning in because he's the I guess the person assigned to Barry if something were to go wrong. Um, like if he were to ever turn evil or start to become a problem, Black Lightning is the person that they would call to handle Barry. Um, doesn't make sense to me because Superman and Supergirl are on this earth and they move almost about as fast. But essentially, the mindset is that Black Lightning can use his powers to depower Barry. And so I guess that's why they chose him. I would have liked an episode where before Armageddon, we could have gotten some dynamic between Barry and Black Lightning. Um, it's not even that I would have liked it. We needed it because it almost feels like he shows up in Crisis. They don't really get to spend a lot of time together. Um, Black Lightning just kind of does something that he respects um, to try and save the world, but it doesn't end up working. And then Barry gets shuffled off, and they don't see each other again until the meeting of the Justice League. But he's just like a random person that's there. I feel not even feel they should have built up that relationship more before he showed up back in Armageddon. Point blank period. And then the last one, the Flash and the Legends should have had a crossover with an emphasis on Heatwave post the death of Captain Cold. Don't make sense to me why we never got that one. Crazy, crazy work. So Captain Cold and Heatwave were two villains on the Flash. They had premiered in season 1, and they gave the Flash some trouble that he probably shouldn't really needed trouble from, if I'm being honest. But They end up reforming themselves and becoming members of the Legends of Tomorrow. At the end of season 1 of Legends of Tomorrow, Captain Cold sacrifices himself to save the rest of the Legends, leaving his partner in crime, Heatwave, behind. And Barry doesn't find out about Snart's death. That's the name of Captain Cold, by the way. Barry doesn't find out about Snart's death until the invasion crossover, which happens halfway through his season. So nobody goes out of his way to relay this information to Barry, who had formed a pretty strong bond to Captain Cold. It's quite literally the reason why Cold changes from being a villain to being one of the most impactful heroes in the Arrowverse. And it's weird to me that we never got any fallout or Barry even checking on Heatwave, knowing that Captain Cold sacrificed himself for just because I guess because they weren't as close as Captain Cold was to the Flash. But it just it just feels like such a weird decision to me, that we didn't get a crossover. Feels weird to me that we didn't get a crossover between the only hero who can time travel by themselves and the team of time travelers. In general, like, it doesn't make sense to me, because we were quite literally traveling through time at the beginning of Legends season 2, and Barry would have already created Flashpoint at that point. So they should have at the very least, have noticed that Flashpoint was created. Like, it missed opportunity. But if they did do a crossover, they absolutely should have done one with Heatwave and the Flash, like, getting used to talking again. Doesn't make sense to me why we didn't get it. But hey, those are the 5 episodes that I think the Arrowverse should have done, in terms of crossovers. Um, yeah, I feel like I'm doing pretty good with what I was what I was suggesting there. Y'all let me know in the comment section down below what's a show that I should do in the Arrowverse, to say episodes that we should have gotten, because you know, specific shows I feel like will be interesting in a different way, because then I can only look at, like, that show's narrative and see if there were plot points that they just dropped or missed or whatever. But I would be so down to do that. Y'all let me know in the comment section down below what's a show. I guess it doesn't have to be in the Arrowverse, but it would be fun to see what you guys come up with. What's a show that I can do this for next? And if this video gets to 200 likes, just like the last one, then I'll continue on with this series of going through episodes we should have gotten of that show. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Feel free to check me out on the other channel that I'm on, Catered Chaos. There I talk all things entertainment, news, and shows and movies and stuff like that, along with a group of people. We give you our thoughts, comments, questions, concerns about them. We go live on Twitch and YouTube around 7 p.m. Eastern every Thursday. So you can just check us out on Catered Chaos. We also go live and play some games throughout the week, but yeah, that's kind of sporadic. But you can catch me on Monday nights, where I play Pokemon Unite with a group of people that I have come to love. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's been Trey. Be brave. Oh, hold on. I did my outro wrong. What's wrong with me? Be brave. Be bold. Be you. Hopefully I will be in your future. That's how you can tell I haven't done this in a while. I did a video before this, did it exactly right. Did this second video right here, and I'm getting my things wrong. That's crazy work. Gotta be back at it.